What's up, nostalgia lovers? Welcome back to Star Spangled Nostalgia. Today, we're diving deep into the television graveyard of 1983, a year that gave us some of the most spectacularly bizarre flops in TV history. I'm talking about shows so strange, so magnificently awful, that they've become legendary for all the wrong reasons. But before we unleash this parade of television disasters, do me a huge favor. Smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you love diving into the weird corners of pop culture history like I do, you're going to want to stick around for all our retro deep dives. Trust me, this rabbit hole goes deep. Now, are you ready to explore the wreckage? Let's go! Alright, so before we count down these spectacular failures, we need to understand why these TV shows from 1983 was such an absolute massacre. And it all comes down to one word: desperation. Number 10, The Rousters, Carnival Cowboys Gone Wrong. So NBC executives apparently sat in a boardroom and thought, you know what America needs? A show about Wyatt Earp's descendants who travel with a carnival and work as part-time bounty hunters. I'm not making this up, people. This was a real show that real humans with real jobs thought was a good idea. The concept was basically, what if the Wild West met the circus? And also, there's crime fighting. It starred Chad Everett, who you might remember from Medical Center, as Wyatt Earp III. Yes, they actually used the Earp name. Wyatt Earp is probably spinning in his grave. Now, to NBC's credit, they threw some money at this thing. Real carnival sets, stunt sequences, the whole 9 yards. But here's the problem. Nobody could figure out what genre this show was supposed to be. Was it a Western? An action show? A family drama? A circus documentary? The answer was apparently none of the above, because audiences took one look at this mess and said, hard pass. The show managed to air exactly 4 episodes before NBC quietly put it out of its misery. 4 episodes? That's not even a full month of television. The Rousters came, saw, and got absolutely conquered by viewer apathy. And honestly, that's probably for the best. Number 9, The Yellow Rose, soap opera without the suds. Coming in at number 9 is The Yellow Rose, which was NBC's attempt to capture some of that sweet, sweet Dallas money. Because if there's one thing network executives love, it's trying to copy someone else's homework. The setup was classic primetime soap. Rich Texas family, sprawling ranch, lots of drama, beautiful people making bad decisions. You know the drill. They even got some decent actors, including Sybil Shepherd and David Soul from Starsky and Hutch. But here's the thing about copying successful formulas. You actually have to understand why they worked in the first place. Dallas worked because it had compelling characters, outrageous storylines, and that perfect soap opera blend of glamour and trash. The Yellow Rose had, well, it had ranches and cowboy hats, and a lot of people standing around looking vaguely concerned about things. The show premiered with decent ratings. People were curious about NBC's Dallas knockoff. But curiosity only gets you so far when your show is basically Dallas but boring. Viewers quickly realized that all the Texas scenery in the world couldn't make up for lackluster writing and characters they just didn't care about. The show limped along for 1 season before NBC finally put it out to pasture. The Yellow Rose proved that you can't just slap a cowboy hat on mediocrity and call it must-see TV. Although, to be fair to NBC, they were about to try much weirder things than cowboy hats. Number 8, Cutter to Houston, the medical drama that flatlined. At number 8, we have Cutter to Houston, a medical drama that sounds like it should have been a reality show about people moving to Texas. The premise was actually pretty straightforward by 1983 standards. 3 big city doctors get stuck working at a rural Texas hospital. Culture clash ensues, medical emergencies happen, lessons are learned. It's a tale as old as television itself. Saturday night at 8 p.m. in 1983 was where TV shows went to die. You're competing with people actually having lives, going out, having fun, doing literally anything other than watching a medical drama about doctors in Texas. Cutter to Houston managed to survive for 7 whole episodes before CBS pulled the plug. 7 episodes of Alec Baldwin's early career that he probably hopes everyone has forgotten about. The show's failure was so swift and complete that CBS immediately replaced it with another show on this list. Yes, the graveyard of 1983 was so packed that shows were literally being buried on top of each other. Number 7, Bay City Blues, The $1 Million Mistake. Now we're getting into the really expensive failures, and boy oh boy, is Bay City Blues a doozy. This is what happens when you combine high expectations, bigger budgets, and spectacularly bad timing. Bay City Blues was created by Stephen Bocco, who had just come off the massive success of Hill Street Blues. The guy was television royalty, so NBC basically gave him a blank check and said, "Make us a hit about baseball." $850,000 per episode in 1983 money. That's like spending over $2 million per episode today for a show about minor league baseball. And they didn't just spend that money on craft services, folks. They built an actual baseball stadium. Not a set that looked like a stadium, an actual functional baseball stadium. Because apparently someone at NBC thought, you know what our baseball show needs? The most expensive baseball stadium in television history. The cast was actually pretty impressive. Future stars Sharon Stone and Dennis Franz, who would later team up with Bocco again on NYPD Blue. So the talent was there, the budget was definitely there, and the pedigree was rock solid. So what went wrong? Everything. The show aired opposite ABC's Heart to Heart, and apparently America preferred glamorous millionaire amateur detectives to struggling minor league baseball players. Bay City Blues struck out so hard, it's legendary. It ranked 93rd out of 101 shows that season. 93rd! With that budget, they should have been buying viewers dinner and personally driving them to their TVs. NBC pulled the plug after just 4 episodes. 4! They built a stadium for 4 episodes of television. The financial loss was so catastrophic that it literally got Stephen Bocco fired from MTM Productions. Bay City Blues proved that you can't buy your way to success in television. Sometimes a swing and a miss is just a swing and a miss, no matter how expensive your stadium is. Number 6, Jennifer Slept Here, the ghost comedy nobody asked for. A show that answered the question nobody was asking. What if we remade Topper but made it less charming and more generic? The setup was pure 1980s high concept. A family moves into the former home of a deceased Hollywood actress named Jennifer Farrell, who's still hanging around as a ghost. The twist? Only the teenage son can see and talk to her. Now, this isn't actually a terrible premise for a sitcom. The 1930s movie Topper worked with basically the same idea. The problem was that Jennifer Slept Here brought absolutely nothing new to the concept. It was like someone watched Topper and thought, you know what this needs? To be exactly the same, but in the 1980s? They cast Ann Gillian as the ghost, and she was actually pretty good in the role. She had the glamour and comedic timing to pull off a 1940s movie star stuck in the 1980s. The problem was everything around her. The writing was lazy, the premises were predictable, and worst of all, they stuck it in the Friday night death slot. Friday nights in 1983 meant going up against the Dukes of Hazzard and Webster. So you're asking audiences to choose between car chases with the Duke boys, adorable Webster being adorable, or a ghost making jokes about 1980s technology. Guess which one lost? Jennifer Slept Here managed to haunt NBC for 13 episodes before being exorcised from the schedule. The show's failure was so complete that even its summer reruns couldn't resurrect it. The really sad part is that one of the stars, Glenn Scarpelli, actually left a successful show one day at a time to be in this disaster. He went from a steady gig on a hit show to a ghost story that nobody wanted to watch. Sometimes the real horror story is behind the cameras. Number 5. We Got It Made, the sitcom that made nobody happy. Picture this. Two bachelors hire a gorgeous live-in maid, and wacky misunderstandings ensue. If that sounds like something from the 1960s, congratulations. You have functioning brain cells, which is more than we can say for the NBC executives who greenlit this thing. The show starred Tom Villard and Matt McCoy as the bachelors, and Terry Copley as their maid, Mickey. And look, there's nothing wrong with any of these actors individually, but putting them together in this premise was like trying to make a smartphone out of vacuum tubes. By 1983, audiences had moved past the attractive woman causes chaos in men's lives formula. We had shows like Cheers and Family Ties that treated women like actual human beings with personalities and motivations beyond looking pretty and causing confusion. We Got It Made felt like it was written by someone who had been in a coma since 1965 and just woke up. The jokes were stale, the situations were predictable, and the whole thing had this weird, uncomfortable vibe that made you feel like you needed a shower after watching. But here's the really weird part. The show actually got renewed for a second season. Not on NBC, though. Oh no, NBC canceled it faster than you can say sexual harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. Instead, it got picked up for first-run syndication, where it somehow managed to shamble along for another season, like a zombie sitcom that refused to die. We Got It Made proved that even in the anything goes world of 1983 television, some ideas were just too dated to survive. Although apparently not too dated for syndication, which tells you everything you need to know about the quality standards of local TV stations in the 1980s. Number 4, Automan, the holographic hero that couldn't compute. Now we're getting into the really weird territory, and at number 4, we have Automan, a show that tried to capitalize on the Tron craze and ended up creating something that was part superhero show, part tech demo, and all kinds of ridiculous. The premise was like something a 12-year-old would come up with after watching Tehran and eating too much sugar. A computer programmer creates a holographic superhero who fights crime in the real world. Our hero was Walter Nebuchadnezzar, played by DC Arnaz Jr., a police computer expert who creates the most advanced artificial intelligence ever conceived. This AI manifests as Automan, think Tron guy, but with a budget and delusions of grandeur. Now, to ABC's credit, they went all in on the visual effects. For 1983, some of this stuff looked genuinely impressive. Automan had a glowing car called the Auto Car, a motorcycle called the Auto Chopper, and a little sidekick called Cursor, who could materialize objects out of thin air. The problem was that all these cool effects ate up most of the budget and most of the screen time. Episodes would grind to a halt whenever Automan needed to do something cool, which was constantly, because the whole point of the show was, look at our fancy computer graphics. But the real killer was the time slot. A BC scheduled Automan against NBC's Remington Steele and CBS's Scarecrow and Mrs. King. So you're asking audiences to choose between Pierce Brosnan being charming, Bruce Boxleitner and Kate Jackson having chemistry, or a holographic man in a glowing outfit fighting crime with the power of primitive computer animation. Automan lasted exactly 13 episodes before ABC pulled the plug. The show was like a really expensive tech demo that someone accidentally put on television. It looked cool for about 5 minutes, and then you realized you were watching a computer screensaver with delusions of being a TV show. Ottoman proved that cool special effects are no substitute for good writing, compelling characters, or a premise that makes sense to anyone over the age of 12. Although, honestly, the 12-year-olds probably would have been the show's target audience if anyone had bothered to ask them. Okay, we've reached the part of our countdown where reality starts to break down, because at number 3, we have Mr. Smith, a show about a talking orangutan who works as a political advisor in Washington, D.C. I want you to imagine the pitch meeting for this show. Someone actually walked into a room full of television executives and said, "What if we made a sitcom about a genius orangutan who gives advice to politicians?" And instead of being immediately escorted to a mental health facility, they got a TV series. Mr. Smith, yes, that was actually the orangutan's name, had an IQ of 256 and worked as a special advisor to a government think tank. The orangutan was voiced by Ed Weinberger, who had worked on successful shows like Taxi and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. So this wasn't some random hack job. This was a seasoned television professional lending his voice to a talking orangutan sitcom. Think about that for a moment. Someone who helped create some of the greatest sitcoms in television history ended up doing voice work for a politically minded primate. But here's the thing about high-concept comedy. The concept has to actually be funny. And apparently, the sight of an orangutan in a suit discussing fiscal policy wasn't as hilarious as NBC thought it would be. The show premiered to terrible ratings and got absolutely savaged by critics. It lasted less than 2 months before NBC put it out of its misery. They even tried a desperate promotion where viewers could call a 1-900 number to hear messages from Mr. Smith. A 1-900 number for an orangutan. The fact that this was someone's actual marketing strategy tells you everything you need to know about how badly this show was flailing. Mr. Smith proved that there are some premises so bizarre, so fundamentally weird, that not even good writers and experienced producers can save them. Sometimes a talking orangutan is just a talking orangutan, and that's not enough to build a TV series on. Number 2, Manimal, the shape-shifting superhero that shifted into cancellation. We're in the final 2 now, and at number 2, we have the crown jewel of 1980s television absurdity, Manimal, a show so wonderfully, spectacularly ridiculous that it's achieved legendary status among TV disaster enthusiasts. The premise? Dr. Jonathan Chase is a man who can transform into any animal to fight crime. Any animal. He's like a one-man nature documentary with a badge and a serious overacting problem. Now, here's where things get interesting. The special effects were created by Stan Winston, the same guy who would later do the effects for Terminator, Aliens, and Jurassic Park. So this wasn't some cheap, thrown-together production. They had actual Hollywood movie magic behind the transformations. And those transformation sequences were genuinely impressive for 1983. You'd watch Dr. Chase's face bubble and morph as fur sprouted from his skin, his bones would reshape, and suddenly, there would be a panther or a hawk where a man used to be. And here's the kicker. Despite the premise of can transform into any animal, he basically only ever turned into 2 animals, a panther and a hawk. That's it. Apparently, the budget for any animal was exactly 2 animals. The show also never explained how he got his powers, why his clothes magically reappeared after transformations, or frankly, why anyone thought this was a good idea for a weekly television series. But the real killer was the time slot. NBC, in their infinite wisdom, scheduled Manimal against Dallas, the biggest show on television at the time. So you're asking audiences to choose between J.R. Ewing scheming and oil deals, or a guy who turns into a panther to solve crimes. Manimal lasted exactly 8 episodes. 8. They created all these expensive transformation effects, hired Stan Winston, got Simon McCorkindale to commit to turning into animals on national television, and it lasted 2 months. But here's the beautiful thing about Manimal. It's so utterly, completely bonkers that it's become a cult classic. People still talk about it, still laugh about it, still can't quite believe it actually existed. It's achieved a kind of immortality that most successful shows never reach. Manimal proved that sometimes the biggest failures become the most memorable successes. It may have died on network television, but it lives forever in the hearts of people who appreciate truly spectacular television disasters. And finally, at number 1, we have Whiz Kids, the most tragic failure on our list, because it was actually ahead of its time, and that's what killed it. Whiz Kids was about a group of high school students who used their computer skills to solve crimes and mysteries. They had access to a supercomputer named Ralph. Yes, the computer had a name, and they used it to hack into systems and uncover conspiracies. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because every TV show and movie about teenage hackers since 1983 has basically stolen this exact formula. But in 1983, the idea of teenagers being computer experts was revolutionary, terrifying, and completely misunderstood. The show premiered right after the movie War Games had scared the hell out of America, with its story of a teenage hacker nearly starting World War III. So, when Whiz Kids showed up with its own teenage computer experts, critics and parents went absolutely ballistic. Critics called the show appalling and disturbing for supposedly teaching kids how to commit computer crimes. Parent groups organized boycotts. The moral panic was so intense that CBS was forced to change storylines to show the kids getting information through legal means. But the real killer was a scheduling disaster. CBS moved Whiz Kids from Wednesday nights to Saturday nights to replace the failed cutter to Houston. Saturday nights in 1983 was where shows went to die, and Whiz Kids was no exception. The new time slot put them up against NBC's Different Strokes and Silver Spoons, plus ABC's TJ Hooker. So you're asking the same target audience, kids and teens, to choose between Arnold saying, "What you talking about, Willis?" Ricky Schroeder being adorable, William Shatner fighting crime, or teenagers using computers. In 1983, computers lost, badly. The show was effectively canceled after just 5 episodes in its new time slot, with the remaining episodes being burned off months later. But here's why Whiz Kids deserves the number 1 spot. It was absolutely, completely right about the future. Everything the show predicted about computers, technology, and the role they'd play in our lives came true. It just happened to predict it 20 years too early. Today, we live in the world that Whiz Kids imagined. Teenagers with supercomputers in their pockets, using technology to solve problems and uncover information. The show that was considered dangerous and unrealistic in 1983 now looks prophetic. Whiz Kids failed because it was too smart, too forward-thinking, and too revolutionary for its time. It's the most successful failure in television history. A show that was so right about the future that it couldn't survive the present. The flops of 1983 remind us that sometimes the most spectacular failures are more interesting than the safest successes. They're monuments to creativity, ambition, and the willingness to fail magnificently while trying something nobody had ever tried before. Now, I want to hear from you guys. Did you watch any of these disasters when they originally aired? Do you remember seeing commercials for Manimal and thinking, "What the hell is this?" Have you ever called a 1-900 number to hear messages from a talking orangutan? Please tell me someone out there actually did that. Drop your memories and thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into TV's strangest failures, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We've got tons more retro TV content coming your way. Next week, we're diving into the sitcom scandals of the 1970s. And trust me, those stories are absolutely wild.